So we go back and we look at how all of this ties into the dollars per student. What we know is that in Ferndale, our dollars per student, $10,559. Our peer cohort, $10,204. A difference of about $355.29 per student more than what our average cohort is. Multiplied by the number of students in the district, about 1 million. Thanks, Paul. About 1.3 million, just under 1.3 million. Just about the numbers that we would need to save relative to the loss projected from the DLC if we were to make that thing whole. We know in addition to that, there are some other expenses that the district's going to have to encounter in the next several years. One is just the bus fleet, rolling that over and renewing the leases, estimated to be $100,000 a year. A need for some textbooks materials on an annual basis, approximately $150,000 a year. And we've got some salary increases that have already been committed contractually that will cost the district about $600,000 per year, plus the loss of $1.6 million from the DLC, comes up to about $2.5 million in cuts that would be necessary for 2015, 2016, or by the time we get to 16, 17, we're in a deficit condition. Here's the answer to your question, ma'am. When you look at the total dollars and how the dollars are allocated, you can see that from an instruction standpoint, what's allocated in the classroom, 48% of the budget. 44% of the budget is allocated for non-instructional activities, functions performed in the district, custodial, secretary, administrative, all of the other functions. About 6% allocated for community services, and then less than 0.5% for other miscellaneous expenditures that the district might make. The key is the difference between the instructional component and the non-instructional support component. When you look at comparison with our cohort group, the county average, you can see our 48.68%. That includes the Career Center. If you look at that, we're 51.9% for instruction as compared to 61.4% for the average across Wayne County. So we're spending out of the total dollars we receive about 10% less in direct instruction for students than what the average across the county is, which means we're spending more for instructional support services than what the county average is, and more than the non-instructional community support services are along the way. So it's not how many dollars we have, it's how do we allocate those dollars. Your question? I think Blake is going to talk about that in a few minutes as we get toward the end. He'll give you some specifics as to what they're doing to try to change that trend. But I want to move forward here and show you that even though the percentage that we spend on instruction, it's not all going into employee salaries. In fact, if you look at the average teacher salary in Ferndale in comparison to the other 27 districts in Oakland County, there are only 2 that have an average teacher salary lower than what Ferndale does. So it's the dollars that we spend for resource materials for students, programs and services that go beyond the direct teacher standing in front of the class that is putting us at a disadvantage. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Plante Moran, and they're going to talk about their review of the facilities.
Thanks again, Michael. So we gave you a snapshot in terms of the existing 11 facilities, their location, their sizes, the square footages, and again, the capacity, if you will, going forward. And so one of the things, again, this is just a repeat of that similar slide. So again, we have 247 classrooms. That first circle on the left, that's our current fall count of our programs. Again, we're at 51% utilization. The state of Michigan in the Department of Treasury and Department of Education want you in that 85% range or goal, if you will. Again, taking a look at our current students population is what types of facilities ultimately would be going forward. So again, looking at a grade level accommodation, and I know there's going to be some discussions of should we have a bunch of K5s, should we have PK1s, 2s, 3s, and there's a variety of different configurations, but looking at elementary schools that can accommodate PK through a 5 grade, square footage of roughly 45,000 square feet or more, the number of classrooms, kind of a goal range between 18 to 20 or even greater. At the Ferndale Middle School, again, looking at the combined facility of roughly 414,000 square feet, 81 classrooms. And then University High School, again, a 25 classroom requirement. So again, going from 800,000 plus square footage down to roughly 585,000 square feet. I know there's some dollar amounts of how much you save per square foot, et cetera, that we'll talk a little bit later, but again, really right-sizing the district to be able to accommodate any future growth. So when Blake says, this is not for the next 1 or 2 years, this is looking out 10 years. Will the population actually increase? The economy's coming back. We actually saw a slight uptick in live births. Again, this would be a portfolio of the district with, again, the range of around 85% utilization. I'm going to turn it over to Ahmed Beasley within Plante Moran Crest. He's our construction expert who actually had the privilege of walking every square inch of the building. Just to go high level of some of the critical needs. He'll talk about the current bond, how we kind of got there, and then from there we'll go from there.
Thanks, Paul. As Paul stated, a part of the facility utilization piece is that we go through and we assess the condition of each facility. And as he stated, I had the pleasure of walking every single inch of quite a few of, if not all, the facilities in the district to assess the condition of each of the facilities from a standpoint of what the site looked like, what the building envelope looked like, and the building envelope consists of the roof condition, the exterior, the brick, the mortars, the windows. Also, I looked at the interior, obviously, looked at critical needs on the inside, focusing on life safety issues and things that were that needed to be brought into within code compliance. Also, I looked at the electrical systems, mechanical systems, to give a full assessment of what the condition of each of the buildings were. As you are aware, you are currently going under a bond program. There's a bond program in place, and just a little bit of history on that bond started out once all the needs, once all the wants and wishes were compiled. That bond program was initially $43 million. It was scaled back to make it more attractable to the voters, if you will, more attractable, something that will probably most likely pass. So it was scaled back to $22 million. So within that process, some of the items that most likely needed to be addressed were scaled back and taken out. And as I went through the building, there were some things that obviously critical needs, life safety issues that needed to be addressed. And as I went through and walked through each portion of the building, I did talk to the principals, the custodians at each of the facilities, just to get an idea of what issues they have on a day-to-day regular basis at each of the facilities. Also, as I went through, I just essentially picked out those items that I thought that really needed to be addressed within the next 1 to 3 years. And as I went through, I did take pictures, and I'll give you a couple examples of what we found as we went through in each of the buildings. At the Jefferson Center, there were quite a few areas, and there were active leaks actually in that particular building. Some have been addressed, again, throughout the bond program, but there's still a need to address that roof. As you can see in the picture here to the left, there was some water damage due to the condition of the roof. Also, in assessing the building, as I stated, we look at the building envelope. And in the building envelope, you look at the brick and mortars, if you will. And a part of that issue was due to the lack of some tuck pointing over the course of the years. Water infiltrates between the brick facade and the wall. freeze-thaw process occurs over the course of time through the seasons, and you get masonry units that are pushed out. And this is just an example of quite a few areas that I saw and noticed at Jefferson Center that needed to be addressed. Also at Jefferson Center, the boilers are antiquated. Though you may have some boilers that are functional, they get through, they get you by, one thing there that you need to be aware of is that the older boilers are obviously less efficient. Less efficient boilers add to your operational costs. So this particular building, boilers need to be upgraded so that you can implement the newer, more efficient boilers that are less cost expensive to your operation of the building. One of the, I would say, major issues at Jefferson that I noticed was that this picture here denotes the entrance into the gym. If I was in a wheelchair, I wouldn't be able to access that space. Not only that, I wouldn't be able to access the second floor as there's no elevator in the building. So there are quite a few ADA compliance issues at that particular building that need to be addressed. At Grant Early Childhood Center, picture on the far upper right or left hand shows water damage based on roof condition. Water is penetrated through the roof membrane, causes leaks, and then ultimately you have, in some cases, you may have some molding. So the roof needs to be addressed within the next 1 to 3 years. Also, again, you have antiquated boilers. They need to be addressed as well. And at Grant, I also noticed there was a drainage issue in the boiler room. So that would need to be addressed as well. Also at Grant, and going through and looking at the building envelope, again, you have the situation where masonry, brick facade is falling off of the building. Old building needs to be maintained. If the work wasn't done over the course of the years, again, you get these situations with the winters that we go through and the summers and springs and seasons we go through in Michigan, and you get masonry units that are actually falling off of the building. And the left-hand picture that you note there, that you see some areas where some work has been attempted, but also you see areas where those patches are actually falling off. And that far left picture was actually a picture where a piece had fallen off at some point and fallen into an area where the parents and children walk. So an area that obviously needs to be addressed. Again, the picture on the right doesn't give you a good picture or a visual in the picture, but there you have a structural issue where the water has actually gotten in behind the brick and is forcing the brick out through the freeze-thaw phases, and there's a potential for more courses of brick in that particular situation to fall off of the building. Again, obviously an item that needs to be addressed throughout the building, actually. At Jackson Center, roof. Let's be honest, useful life needs to be replaced. In areas even where there's a newer roof, you see areas of excessive ponding. Those areas need to be addressed so that further damage to the building or to the roof and water infiltration does not occur. At Roosevelt, couple pictures here, again showing the roof beyond its useful life. And a smaller picture on the right, you can see where there's areas where the shingles are actually lifted up. And on the left picture, you can see, if you can't kind of see it that well, but there are areas of ponding water. And one of the effects of that water just sitting on the roof there is that you get issues with the underlying insulation and it becomes wet, and therefore there creates a structural situation. There were areas on the Roosevelt roof that I started to walk on and thought twice about it because of just the nature of it being soft. Again, at Roosevelt, as you can see, there's a picture on the left of the gym roof. Water's penetrated through the roof membrane, causing water damage. Again, those panels in there are what are called tectum panels. Those panels are now, once they become wet, they become structurally compromised. Roof needs to be replaced, and those panels, which is a part of the roof system, needs to be replaced as well. Boilers, again, past their beyond their useful life, needs to be upgraded so that the more efficient units can be put in place. At Roosevelt, there are actually, in this picture, it's hard to really depict, but there are a few classrooms at Roosevelt that are not being used as classrooms. And the reason that they're not being used as classrooms is because by law, you have to have 2 points of egress out of any instructional area. And this classroom here, which is not being used as a classroom at this point, thankfully, shows that I'm standing at the door taking the picture. There's no other form of egress unless I go out of that window, which leads to a courtyard. So you have areas, a few classrooms there that can't be used as classrooms because of this particular issue. Again, at Roosevelt, looking at the building envelope, which may seem pretty minor in this case, where you got a header of a window that's separated from the brick ledge. But what that causes is water infiltration into the building. Water infiltration into a building obviously is not a good thing, but this is an item that needs to be addressed. At University High School, again, the roof, I think that picture can pretty much tell the story of the hodgepodge of roof systems that you have up there. That roof needs to be addressed. Picture on the right, again, it's sort of hard to see in the picture there, but you have an issue of water getting in between the brick and the wall. Freeze-thaw situation pushes the brick out, therefore causing a situation where it's life safety or safety issue as well as structural issues. Boiler beyond its useful life needs to be upgraded. Parking lot issues over the course of time. There was some parking lot work done over there, but again, there are areas that still need to be addressed. Most people don't assume that a parking lot is an asset, but a lot of dollars can be spent on patching, sealing a parking lot, trying to get it by if you don't address it right and get it done and get it over with. And instead of going through all the pictures of every school, I just wanted to give you an idea of what I saw in my visits to each of the schools. But here is a summary of all the items that we went through, noted the items, tagged the items, and went back and assigned a cost to each of those items. And this is a summary at each of the facilities that I visited that the dollar amounts here account for the items that were noted. Again, I included in here cost for soft costs, which is cost for professional fees, designer fees, contractor fees, construction manager fees. Those are considered the soft costs. But over in the total column is a total of what it would cost to take care of the capital issues that needed to be addressed at each of the facilities. So, sort of highlighted there at the bottom, if some of these items if things were taken or stay status quo, you're looking at $7.3, $7.4 million in need to address some of these issues, or address these issues that have been identified. But if some adjustments were made, buildings were taken offline, and you would take just those highlighted buildings there, which are buildings that don't need as much work done to them to keep them sustainable, take those into account, and you have less capital needs that are required in order to take care of the facilities that you would want to carry forward, moving forward with a more adjusted, right-sized plan for the district. And again, some of these items, there is a bond program that is underway. We're still doing work at the high school here, which is why you don't see it up there. There may be the potential for some unallocated or some funds to be reallocated to address some of these needs, but there is not enough to address all these needs. So I'll turn it back to Mr. Williams. These are the ones that we would recommend keeping online. And these are Coolidge, Taft, and John F. Kennedy. Not Roosevelt. I'm sorry. If that was an option, then they would take those schools offline. That's not what I'm saying they should do, but I'm saying if you were to keep things as are, those would be the costs to keep those schools sustained. For overall costs, Jefferson total is 1.6 million. Grant 1.2 million. Jackson 1.2 million. Roosevelt 690,000. Want me to keep going? Yes, that was taken. Yes, I knew that. I'm actually a part of what you're doing now in this particular bond, and then I have information. Okay, no. Yes, ma'am. They are not on that list because work is ongoing. There is still probably another summer of worth of work that needs to be done at this building, so it's not on that list. I did walk this building as well, so I am aware of what costs and what the needs that need to be addressed. I don't want to guess.
I think it's important because when you look at, again, the critical needs, people think 22 million, that's a lot of money, and it is. But when you look at this complex, it's 414,000 square feet. And so if you look at, for instance, the size of the building and the critical need requirements, that gives you an idea of potentially, and I think as Mr. Beasley mentioned, the original needs assessment was about $43 million. And so, yes, there are still going to be some things that are not addressed. And that's something that we want to talk a little bit about here in terms of what you do potentially as you're looking at your utilization in buildings. So one of the things we also looked at is the buildings as an asset, the sites as an asset. We worked with a local realtor, Jim Schaefer, if you know him. He's done a little bit of work here in the Ferndale area. Had to take a look and give us the current market values. And so looking at the buildings, the sites, how are they currently zoned, and coming up with how many parcels could you potentially fit on each of these going forward. So again, taking a look at all 11 facilities, the acreage, the estimated land value. Again, this was based on comps of 2014 in December. Again, in the springtime, if the district says, let's review it, again, we often encourage districts to look at it holistically. You can get roughly 14 lots, and I'm not going to read them all, but you can see the varying number of lots, 4.5 acres, all the way up to 12 acres. We did not do it for the middle school and the high school. Again, we're pretty confident this facility is going to be in utilization. So it gives you an idea of approximate value. The question always goes back to, hey, we spent capital dollars in 2002, 2005. There's calculations that the district would look at every single building and how those monies are put back into either a capital account or paying off those debts. So reviewing those next steps, again, basing on the enrollments, aligning with the strategic plan with the district are some options. So looking at potentially a K-5, a 6-8 middle school, a 9-12 high school, a K-5 grade configuration at 2 schools. And again, these are just preliminary, just based on critical needs. So Coolidge, Kennedy, and Taft for further review. And the reason we say that is because they have been updated. They have less cost for future improvement, and they're able to provide that 80 to 90% achievability on the utilization. A 6-8 configuration at the middle school, relocating the admin offices here to the high school, consolidating the PK programs either to Harding or into another K-5 building. And then ultimately looking at lease spaces for those programs that fluctuate, i.e. Distance Learning Center. Another option would be maybe a K4, a 5-8, and a 9-12 high school. You may have one K4 grade configuration. I know we're going to get into some further detail here as we go forward, but potentially adding 12 classrooms at Kennedy. That cost would be about $2.2 to $2.5 million. Some districts look at literally completing a brand new facility to house their entire K4 or K5 population. That's a much larger dollar amount. You'd have to review capital bonds. So how much is left in the current 2012 bond? How much does a sinking fund generate, et cetera? Yes, sir. One of the things that we're actually look at is having University High School as its standalone, and then the high school as it's currently configured. So hopefully that answers your question. Yes. So CASA, I think, is going to be addressed. There's a couple of slides coming up here. So again, a little bit different in terms of K4, 5-8, and 9-12. Some people ask, well, what would a K4 building look like? This is just a sample. This is not a solution, but however, again, adding on 3 classrooms to each of the wings to be able to accommodate that grade configuration. So again, a lot of the detail, the presentations will be up on the website. And with that, I will turn it back to the other PowerPoint slide and continue with the presentation.